I'm life and business coach Samantha Siffring, and this is the Badass Mother Podcast, where we talk inspiration and real life tips to rewrite the rules of motherhood and build a life you love while raising kids. Hey mamas, welcome to episode 35. Today we are going to be talking about fear and how to overcome it. We are going to be talking about fear as it relates to business, but it was inspired by a personal circumstance that just happened in my life this past weekend. My daughter was running in a store, as children sometimes do, and tripped and fell and hit her head on the concrete and ended up with a concussion in the hospital. We had an ambulance ride, and it was all very dramatic. And for those of you who are moms out there, there was a lot of fear involved on my part and on hers and on the rest of the families. And something that I thought about as I started planning out this episode and reflecting on fear was how in this incident, I had to take action even though I was feeling fear, even though this thing was going on that was terrifying and all the thoughts come in your head and all of the worries and the anxieties come in, I still had to take action and moving through it. And I feel like I almost didn't even have time for fear. I almost didn't even have time for very many emotions at all because things happened so quickly. Today, we're going to be talking about fear more in our business, which kind of causes an opposite reaction. But just to wrap up the personal story, my daughter is healthy, happy, back to her normal self, totally fine, everything checked out fine. So it's good. We're all good. But it did get me thinking about fear and how it affects us so much and how biological it is and primitive it is and all of those different things. If you have heard me that much, you know I love to talk about cave people and how our brains have been wired for survival. And fear is one of those things that has been wired into us from an ancient time. So I think this is going to be a really good one if you are like me and tend towards fear and anxiety. That is something that I struggle with a lot. My fears are typically the major stumbling blocks that I have, the major limiting beliefs and thoughts that I have in my business are fear-based more than anything else. So if you can relate to that, this one is for you. You're going to love it. It's going to be so valuable for you. So here's the deal. Fear is biologically wired. It is like a reflex from another time. So some other examples of this are if you've ever seen a baby that gets startled or feels like it's falling or something like that. Babies shoot their limbs out. They shoot out their arms and legs in every direction, like spread eagle. And that is a reflex that is kind of like a monkey type reflex, but that feeling of falling is kind of like if they were falling out of a tree or something like that. Like we're talking ancient stuff here. Babies throw out the limbs to kind of stop themselves and like hit on something to stop them from falling. Another example is, your fingers get all pruny in the bath. If you're in the bath for a long time or hot tub or something, you get all pruned up in your fingers and toes. And that's one that happens, if you were an ancient person who had fallen into a river or something like that, and you were grabbing onto wet rocks, having a little more tread or something like that to kind of grasp on and help you to climb out of the water and not just have that slippery, smooth surface, having that kind of rough surface. It's like a rough hiking boot in the ice or something like that. It just helps you to get out. So nowadays, when we're in the bath, not too hard for most of us to get out of the bath, but for an ancient person in the water who may have accidentally fallen in, it was a very useful reflex. So kind of get into the mindset of fear being in that category. And if you can kind of imagine one of these cave people and what their life was like, leaving the cave, going out alone without the tribe, not conforming to what everybody else was doing, trying to do something new would be life-threatening and dangerous. You know, if you left the cave by yourself and went to some area that you had never been before, there was no guarantee that a tiger wouldn't jump out and eat you or something like that. And our brains are very deeply ingrained with that idea that branching out away from the group and doing something new and unknown is very, very dangerous. Our modern brains still think this on some level, even though we're not consciously like, if I launch a business, a tiger's going to eat me. Our brain kind of responds that way. Our brain really prefers a known situation that it doesn't like to an unknown situation that might be amazing. It would rather stay in what it knows than venture out into what it doesn't know. So now that you're kind of getting the picture of fear, why we have it, it is great for survival, but sometimes it's sabotaging us in our modern life. Let's talk practically about fear. So if you think about some of our biggest fears, aside from things like dying or someone we love dying, which are definitely valid fears, a lot of the common fears that I see are things like public speaking, going to networking events, selling something, having a consult call, starting your own business. All of those things can trigger a lot of fear in us. And the kind of physical response that we get is so similar to if I were out hiking in the mountains and a bear popped out. Like, it is the same kind of experience that many of us feel before going on stage to speak to a large audience. The same kind of sweating, rapid heart rate, clammy hands, all of that same kind of physiological stuff comes up, whether it's a real danger that's actually life-threatening or something else that's just different, that's something we haven't done before, or something that is uncomfortable to us. Basically, our brain's kind of telling us, there's a bear, you're gonna die, run away. And it's not true. So a lot of us let fear paralyze us. Fear can talk us out of chasing our dreams. It can talk us out of doing hard things. And a lot of the time, we don't even realize what's going on. Our brains are pretty creative and crafty sometimes. They know exactly how to talk us out of things. And if you aren't really paying attention, you'll fall for it every time. Before we get into how to overcome our fear and what to really do about our fear, I want to tell you that the point of this isn't to become fearless. I hear a lot about being fearless, and it's a word that I just don't use. I love words like courageous and brave. I love talking about confronting fear. I even am happy to talk about overcoming fear and not letting fear control us and those kinds of things. But we're never going to be without fear. We don't get rid of fear. We don't become fearless. Fear is just as hardwired as the pruny fingers. And I don't think there's anyone out there who has used their mind to make their fingers stop pruning up in the water. If you know of anyone who's been able to do that, let me know, because that would be fascinating. But just realize that fear is that deep into us. It is just a reflex, something that happens before we're even conscious of what's going on. You can't just switch it off. The trick is really to be able to take action despite fear, taking action even when the fear is there. And if you're like me, this is a huge relief, because you don't have to do any work to erase fear, delete fear, make fear go away. Fear can stay. So you just have to do the hard work of taking action even when fear is there. And I feel like that sounds a lot easier than totally eliminating fear. So these are a few steps that I suggest going through with your fear. The first one is to become really aware of your feelings. Really pay attention to your feelings and notice fear when it comes up. And become very observant about it. See if there's a part of your brain that can be experiencing the fear and a part of your brain that can be noticing and watching the fear. If you're able to separate those two parts, you are set up really well for the next steps of this process. And thankfully, our brains are built in a way that allows us to do that. We have that lower brain that experiences primitive type things, and then we have that higher part of our brain that allows us to think about what we're thinking about. So just know you have both pieces in there, and when you find yourself feeling anxiety or fear, use that as your little reminder that you need to pay attention and start noticing what's going on. So notice the fear. Next, you want to question your thoughts. So every feeling that we have comes from a thought that we're having. So if you're experiencing fear, there's going to be a sentence in your brain that you may not have realized was there that triggered that fear. Our brains can be really sneaky, and a lot of times what actually are our feelings can come across as just factual observations. Like it can just seem like the truth, like this is scary. And I want you to really question those, really question what you think is going on, really question all of those sentences in your head. And I love asking myself, is that true? Is that true? I was chatting with somebody earlier today and she was telling me, this is hard. And I immediately was like, oh, there's my reminder. Whenever I have the thought or one of my clients has the thought, something is something, I have this little thing trained in my brain now to question it. So she said, this is hard. And immediately I was like, is it hard? And do the same with your fear thoughts. You may be thinking, this is scary. You can ask yourself, is this scary? You can also be thinking, this is dangerous. And you can ask yourself, is this dangerous? And sometimes it is. So I'm not telling you this to just overcome every kind of fear ever. There are absolutely very real fears. When my daughter was in the hospital, I had some fears that felt like real fears. I thought potentially I could be losing her, or this could be something that would affect her the rest of her life, or this could be something really serious. And those could have been real fears. So I don't want you to be in this place where you're just like, every fear is invalid and I should shut off all fear. I definitely did not do that in that moment. Those fears, I felt, hey, these are valid. These are valid fears to have, and it's okay to be worried about my child when she's laying in a hospital bed or riding in an ambulance or whatever, like those were real fears. There's also fears that I have that are completely irrational, especially in my business. I feel like in our businesses, we have the same. We have real fears and we have irrational fears. And what I have noticed in myself and in my clients, irrational fears are a little bit more common. So, fears like, I don't know how to get clients, I'm never going to get another client, my clients aren't happy, my business isn't going to work, this person's going to say no, this person's going to say yes. Sometimes people are afraid of success too. All of these fears are pretty much mind drama that we're making up that makes us feel terrible, that holds us back in our business, and all of those thoughts create fear. So what I want you to think about if you are experiencing fear in your business is to really ask yourself, first of all, is this a factual observation or is this a piece of drama that I'm making up? But you'll also want to investigate, what's the worst case scenario? What if I never get another client? What if all my clients cancel? What if my business doesn't work? All of those things, you could ask yourself, okay, what does that actually mean? What does it mean if my business doesn't work? What does that look like? What would I do? But also, what's the worst case scenario? If my business didn't work and I lost everything in my business, what would happen? I was just chatting about this the other day too. I realized the worst case scenario in my business feels like I'm going to lose everything and become homeless. The actual worst case scenario in my business is I would have to cut back on expenses. The worst case scenario for some of my clients is they might have to rent out their house and move in with their parents. They might have to sell something. They might have to go get a job. None of these things are as terrible as we feel in the moment of fear, because in the moment of fear, we're thinking death, even if we're not consciously thinking it, even if it's not even a possibility in that situation. So you really want to question your thoughts and not just accept them as true. Next, you're going to want to allow your feelings, especially in those moments where it's a real fear. When it's a real fear of, I don't know if my business is going to work, or when it's a real fear of, I don't know if my daughter's going to make it through this. Those are real fears. Those are real unknowns, and unknowns are scary. So in these moments, you have to just let that feeling happen. You need to feel it. You need to keep breathing. And sometimes I think a really nice way to handle this as well is to thank the fear. I do this especially with public speaking. I will first breathe. So I have this quote that I heard years ago. I've probably shared it here before because I love it so much. But it is, fear is excitement without the breath. And that reminds me to keep breathing when I'm feeling afraid. And sometimes when I do that, the fear turns to excitement. But then other times, again, I think public speaking is a great example because it's something that used to freak me out. It's not something I naturally thought I loved or thought I was great at, but actually turns out I do. But I even still get those butterflies. I get nervous. And in those moments where I'm feeling afraid, I will just thank my body. Thanks so much for trying to keep me safe and alive. I'm going to be totally fine. Standing on this stage with a microphone is not going to kill me. Thanks for checking in. We're all good. And then what I found when it was a real fear, so like with my daughter, in that moment, I asked myself, okay, I'm going to feel fear. I'm going to feel worry. What else do I want to feel? And in that moment, for me, the other thing I wanted to feel was love for her. And I found that was really good to be able to acknowledge that I was afraid, but also acknowledge that I have deep love for her. One more thing about allowing your feelings. There is this incredible book called Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. She is the Eat, Pray, Love lady, and she wrote a book about creativity and making a career from creativity and pursuing your dreams and that kind of thing, called Big Magic. Highly recommend it. So definitely check that one out. And she talked about fear and how fear can paralyze us and hold us back. And she says that we're kind of in a car. So we're traveling towards our goals in a car, and we've got lots of feelings in there with us. For those Inside Out fans out there, you may resonate with this idea of traveling with feelings. And she said, it's okay that fear is in the car. It just cannot be in the driver's seat. And I loved that imagery of fear being in the car with you, because fear is along for the ride. Fear is going to be like, girlfriend, what the hell are you doing launching this business, risking putting yourself out there when you might fall flat on your face and this thing might not work? But you have to keep that fear out of the driver's seat. You have to keep going. You can't be stopped by fear. I think that there's a lot of power in making a plan. I talked a lot about that last week with time management, making a plan. And this is kind of the next level of that. After you make that plan, after you get it into the calendar, then the mind drama is going to come out. The lack of motivation, the fear, all of it. Whatever has worked to stop you in the past, your brain will be throwing at you now when you're trying to follow through on the plan that you've made for yourself. So be expecting it, know that it's coming, but this is truly the power of having that plan, because you know what to do. Even though fear is going to try to stop you and make you doubt and make you confused and all of that, if you've got your plan and your schedule mapped out and all of your tasks mapped out, it will be a lot easier for you to step into courage and take action even when you have that fear. All right, I have one more thought for you before we close out today, and that is fear is only a sign that you're doing something different, not that you're doing something wrong. So mamas, when you're out there courageously, bravely building your businesses and stepping out, chasing your dreams and doing this beautiful, sometimes scary work, remember, fear is going to be there, and that's okay. It's totally okay that fear is there. You can keep going. You can keep taking action towards your goal. And the more that you do that, the more you're going to trust, and the more you're going to see results, and the more you're going to feel confidence. And then it's going to become your new normal. And you're going to have to find a new big goal to chase for fear to come out and try to stop you from again. It'll be like a new cycle. All right, mamas, I hope you have an amazing rest of your week. I hope that you will join me online on Facebook over at Online Business Building Mamas. It is a Facebook group that I run that is incredibly amazing, supportive, inclusive, magical, and it just keeps getting better. This week, we hit our 1-year anniversary on the 29th, and I'm just so thankful to all of you who are in the group and who are following along with me. Big things are coming this year, and I just want to thank you so much for being on the ride with me. All right, I will talk to you next week.